You're an embarrassment. Don't come home. That's the last thing my father said to me before Mom's birthday. No explanation, just a command and a cold click of the call ending. So, I didn't come home. Not to celebrate, not to explain myself, not to beg, but fate. It had other plans. At the party, while they laughed, pretending I didn't exist, his boss walked in, looked straight at me, and said, "Hi, boss." And just like that, the room went silent. Champagne froze midair. My mother dropped her glass. My father's face turned to stone. They hadn't just erased me. They'd erased the truth, but the truth showed up anyway, and it didn't need permission to be heard. My name is Liam Parker, and this isn't just a story about family. It's about what happens when silence is mistaken for weakness. When kindness is used against you, and when the people who should protect you are the ones who try to bury you. But before I share everything, I'd love to know you're here with me. Drop a hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. It really helps to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if this story speaks to you even just a little, please consider subscribing. You being here helps more people like me feel less alone, and that means everything. I live in a quiet town 45 minutes outside of Austin. My mornings are clockwork, black coffee brewed precisely at 6:10 a.m. The weather forecast murmuring from the radio while I lace up my shoes. I walk to the Helix Innovations office just as the sun begins to warm the sidewalks. It's peaceful, predictable. Mine. At Helix, I'm not just another employee. I'm the co-founder, managing a $2 million immunotherapy initiative for patients with complicated comorbidities. It's the kind of work that keeps me up at night. Data models, lab approvals, FDA check-ins, but I never complain. I like building something that matters. What I don't talk about is how no one in my family understands it. To them, I'm the odd one. The youngest son who never quite fit in. Ashton, my older brother by 3 years, he's the one they talk about. Charming, photogenic, always in transition between marketing jobs, but never long enough to fail. He's bounced between 4 positions in 3 years and still manages to get applause for trying new things. My parents, Richard and Evelyn, mention me in vague terms, if at all. Liam does something with bio stuff, they say when neighbors ask, and that's generous. Mostly I'm not mentioned. Only my Aunt Marjorie ever truly sees me. She texts every holiday, sometimes just to ask how the weather is. When I had a migraine last year, she mailed me ginger tea and a note that said, "Don't let the world forget you exist." But my family, they forget. For over 2 years, I've quietly paid my parents' utilities, power, water, cable, internet. The bills came to just under $16,000. I never said a word. Ashton had lost his job again. My parents were tight on money. It wasn't out of guilt. It was out of instinct. I thought that maybe if I filled in the gaps, I'd eventually be noticed for it. They never noticed. Or maybe they just didn't care. Messages from my dad usually sounded like this: "Ashton's in a rough patch. If you could help out with the water this month, that would be great." I always replied with a simple done. There was never a thank you, only another request. Like my role in the family was some invisible provider whose feelings didn't factor into the equation. At holidays, I sat at the corner of the table. No one asked about my work. No one asked about me. Conversations revolved around Ashton, his dating life, or my parents' latest vacation they swore they had to budget tightly for. I learned how to keep quiet. I learned how to make myself small. But I also started to keep a spreadsheet. Every dollar I paid went into a file labeled supportjournal.xlsx. Not to collect, not to shame, just to remember that I existed in this structure. That my sacrifices, while invisible, were real. The longer I updated that file, the harder it became to ignore the truth. I wasn't a son. I was an ATM with a pulse. It was late March when things changed. I just walked out of a high-stakes investor meeting in Dallas, heart still thumping from securing a new partnership for Helix. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket on the train ride home. And for once, I felt ready, hopeful even, to call my parents. I wanted to let them know I'd be home early for Mom's birthday. It was a quiet tradition of mine: bake her favorite lemon cake from scratch, bring flowers, and pretend we were a normal family. I dialed my father's number. He picked up on the 3rd ring. "Liam," he said, not unkindly, just neutral. I smiled into the receiver. "Hey, I wanted to let you know I'm coming home for Mom's birthday. I should be there by Friday night, don't..." He cut in. There was a pause. I thought the line had dropped. "Don't come home this year," he repeated, voice low and clipped. "Ashton's bringing someone important, his new boyfriend, Spencer Hayes. He's my manager now, actually. It's delicate. I think your presence would complicate things." I swallowed the heat that rushed to my face. "Complicate things?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Dad sighed like he was tired. Look, it's awkward, okay? You're hard to explain. And honestly, Liam, if you insist on showing up, don't bother calling me your father anymore. Click. Just like that, the call ended. My phone screen returned to the home menu as if nothing monumental had occurred, but my hand still holding the phone trembled slightly. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. This wasn't dismissal. This was erasure. I sat still for a long time, absorbing the weight of those words. I wasn't family unless I stayed invisible. That was the unspoken rule, now spoken aloud. Later that night, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen bathed my apartment in sterile light. I logged into the bank portal, scrolled through the recurring payments labeled Mom and Dad, and began canceling them one by one. Power, internet, cable, water. It wasn't a tantrum. I didn't do it out of spite. I wasn't looking to hurt anyone. I just couldn't be what I'd always been, the silent fixer, the invisible support beam. If they could unsend me, I could unpay their bills. It was that simple. After the final cancellation, I sat back in the dark. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator and the faint static of a paused weather report on the radio. I thought about what it meant to cut a lifeline, especially when no one noticed you were the one holding it. And I wondered for the first time in years what it would feel like to build a life that didn't rely on crumbs of recognition from people who only remembered me when things broke. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was angry, but because I finally felt the edges of a boundary I should have drawn a decade ago. And I knew deep down that this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something I couldn't yet name, something honest. I didn't send the usual text. No happy birthday, Mom. No call, no flowers, nothing. For the first time in 5 years, I skipped the ritual. Not out of anger, but because I had nothing left to say to people who had already erased me. At exactly 9:42 a.m., the time Mom's birthday cake usually got delivered, I watched my phone start to vibrate. One notification after another. First from Ashton, Liam, today really matters. Mom's about to cry. Can you not be selfish for once? Then Evelyn, Liam, sweetheart, the power's out. Can you check the utility company site for us? And finally, Richard, no water, no internet. Fix it. Call them now. Not a single word about the phone call that exiled me from the family. No acknowledgement of what had been said. Just orders, just expectations. They weren't reaching out to reconcile. They were reaching out because their little world was breaking down. And I had always been the quiet technician holding it together. That's when it hit me. I wasn't a son in their eyes. I was tech support, a human utility. My value began and ended with my ability to keep the lights on. Literally, the irony wasn't lost on me. No power, no water, no internet. The perfect birthday backdrop for a house that pretended to be perfect. A house built on denial and decoration, now flickering in the dark. I stared at the screen for a while, the text still glowing, then set the phone down and walked to my closet. I changed into a dark blue button-up, slacks, and a simple blazer. No tie, nothing flashy, just clean lines and quiet dignity. I wasn't going back to fix anything. I wasn't going to apologize for the absence they demanded. I just needed to look them in the eyes and see the truth for myself. See if there was even a flicker of recognition for the son they'd rejected. The drive was silent. No radio, no podcasts, just the hum of the road and the occasional memory tapping against the back of my mind like wind against a window. When I pulled up in front of the house, I noticed the party decorations already sagging. The driveway was crowded, Ashton's car, Richard's aging silver sedan, and what I guessed was Spencer's rental. I parked a few feet away and took a long breath before stepping out. Inside, the air was thick with half-hearted celebration. No music, just murmurs and the clink of dishes. I walked through the front door without knocking. No one rushed to greet me. Richard's eyes locked onto mine like I was a threat to national security. He didn't speak. Ashton paused mid-sentence, clearly startled. Evelyn smiled, but it was the smile you give a neighbor's dog who just knocked over your trash can. No one asked why I was there. No one asked how I was doing. They didn't need to. I was interrupting their narrative, one where I didn't exist. The house was dim. Candles had been lit around the living room, but they did little to cover the fact that the electricity was out. The cake on the dining table had started to sweat and lean, frosting sliding in slow defeat. Mom adjusted it nervously while pretending not to glance at the light switches. I stood near the back of the room, not sitting, not speaking, just watching. They were waiting for someone. That much was obvious. The house had been staged. The decorations had intention. The good china was out. This wasn't just a birthday. This was a show. And I didn't fit the script. As I stood there, it became clear that they weren't disappointed because I had been gone. They were disappointed because I had shown up and messed with their image of a perfect family. They had prepped this day to impress Spencer Hayes, Ashton's new boyfriend, who also happened to be Richard's boss. They were trying to sell a version of the Brooks family that I didn't belong in. A polished portrait where Ashton was the golden son, Richard the respectable patriarch, Evelyn the graceful hostess. And me, I wasn't even meant to be in the frame. But I was there now. And I wasn't leaving. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand attention. I simply existed. And that alone was enough to make them squirm. No one offered me a chair. So I stood, hands in my pockets, watching from the shadows like some minor character in a play I'd never been cast in. The table was set with too many forks. The napkins were folded into elaborate shapes. It reeked of performance. Evelyn fussed with the centerpiece, her hands slightly shaking. Ashton was checking his phone every 30 seconds, likely tracking Spencer's arrival. Richard paced near the hallway, his jaw clenched, avoiding eye contact with me entirely. The entire room was vibrating with anticipation. Every dish, every floral arrangement, every fabricated smile had one purpose: to make Spencer believe this was a family worth knowing, worth admiring. I was the variable they hadn't accounted for. Then the front door opened. Spencer stepped inside, tall and polished, exuding the kind of effortless confidence that came from years in executive roles. He smiled warmly as Ashton rushed to greet him, wrapping an arm around his waist. Evelyn stepped forward, voice sugary. "This is my husband, Richard, our eldest son, Ashton, you've met, and this is." She turned toward me, hesitating. She didn't know how to introduce me. Before she could figure it out, Spencer's eyes met mine. A flicker of recognition, then a slow, genuine smile. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, walking toward me with his hand extended. "Hello, boss." The entire room froze. Ashton's mouth fell open. Evelyn dropped the serving spoon she'd been holding. Richard went pale, gripping the back of a chair for balance. I gave Spencer a brief nod and shook his hand. He turned to the room, oblivious, or maybe not, to the chaos he had just ignited. "Liam Parker, right? Helix Innovations. I just got word I'll be transferring to the Austin branch to work on the Helix Link project. Wasn't expecting my new supervisor to be family." No one responded. The silence was deafening. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. All these years they'd spoken about me in vague, dismissive terms. The boy who did something with biology. The one who wore the wrong shoes, kept his head down, didn't quite belong. Now the truth stood in front of them, undeniable, wearing a suit and calling me boss. I looked at Ashton, who was blinking fast, like he could somehow reverse the moment by refusing to accept it. Then he grabbed my arm and pulled me into the hallway. "You knew," he hissed. "You knew he was my boyfriend. You knew he worked with Dad. You came here to blow everything up." I looked at him, calm as ever. "I came for Mom's birthday. I didn't invite myself into anyone's career. I didn't tell Spencer to call me that. I didn't call myself anything." He stood there, breathing heavily, searching for a counterargument, but there wasn't one. "You could have warned me," he said weakly. "You could have treated me like a brother," I replied. We stood there in silence, years of resentment layered between us like sediment. Back in the dining room, no one had moved. Spencer stood awkwardly near the table, sensing the shift in energy, but too professional to comment. I returned, nodded politely to him, then quietly walked out the door. I didn't need to stay for the candles or the cake. I had already said more in my silence than they ever had with words. The rest of the birthday played out like a stage performance after the curtain had already been torn. No one mentioned what Spencer said. Not one word about Helix or me, or the fact that their entire illusion had just cracked in front of a stranger. I sat at the end of the dining table alone. I wasn't shunned. I was simply invisible again. This time, more completely than ever. Everyone avoided my gaze, as if looking at me too long might make them see something uncomfortable in themselves. Spencer kept things polite. He didn't bring up our connection, didn't linger near me, didn't offer more than neutral pleasantries, professional, careful, smart. When it was finally over, I stood and left without saying goodbye. The door closed behind me with the softest click, but it echoed for hours in my ears. That night, as I lay on my couch staring at the ceiling, my phone buzzed. It was Ashton. "Liam, you made Mom cry. Happy now?" I let it sit there for a while. Let the guilt simmer, then cool. Then I typed back, "If the truth ruins a party, maybe the party was never built to last." I didn't wait for a reply. Later that evening, I received an email from Spencer. Short, direct, kind. "I'm sorry I didn't know more about your family before today. I respected your silence. I ended things with Ashton, not because of you, but because I finally saw the way I was being treated. I read it twice, then deleted it, not because I was angry, but because I didn't want to carry even that little bit of pity. I didn't need it. Not anymore." 3 days passed. On the third evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Richard and Evelyn were standing side by side, both dressed like they were on their way to church. No flowers, no food, no apology, just a clipboard and a folder. We wanted to talk, Richard said. Things have been tight financially. I stepped aside, let them in. Evelyn sat, clutching her purse like a life raft. Richard stood. We're asking for $2,000 a month, he said. Just for a year or two. Help with the mortgage. The cost of living's gone up. He said it like it was a reasonable business proposal. Like we were strangers negotiating rent. Not once did he mention what he'd said to me on the phone. Not once did Evelyn ask how I was. I nodded slowly. I'll consider it. Their eyes lit up, hopeful. I continued, on one condition, Ashton agrees to contribute $1,000 monthly, and you both sign a legal transfer of all property and assets to me in the event of your passing. No tricks, no changes. Richard's eyes narrowed. You want a contract? I didn't flinch. I want clarity. He slapped the table. We raised you for over 20 years, and now you demand paperwork for support? I met his stare. I've given almost $16,000 over the last 2 years without a single acknowledgement. You never called it support. You called it expected. This isn't revenge. This is structure. I don't owe you. The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was final. Evelyn stood first, lips tight. Richard followed. Neither said goodbye. When I shut the door behind them, the sound of their footsteps fading down the hallway was soft, softer than any fight we'd ever had. But it carried more weight than anything they'd ever screamed. I leaned against the door, closed my eyes. I didn't feel triumphant, just still. They hadn't come to make peace. They'd come to re-establish control, to try one last time to turn me into their emergency fund, their technician, their compliant son. But I wasn't that boy anymore, and they finally knew it. The silence after they left was deceptive. I thought maybe, finally, things would quiet down. I returned to my role at Helix Innovations, buried myself in project deadlines, and planning the launch of our new biotech platform. But silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the eye of the storm. 1 week after the party, I woke to dozens of notifications. Ashton had posted a photo on Facebook, Mom sitting beside her melted cake, smiling through what looked like tears. The caption was syrupy, vague, and cutting. Even when someone chooses absence, we choose warmth. Some people only know how to break things. The comments weren't subtle. Ungrateful sons are the worst. Hope you're okay. You deserve better than that. People who sabotage their own mother's birthday? Pathetic. The narrative was already writing itself. I was the villain in a story I hadn't agreed to tell. By noon, a cousin I barely spoke to messaged me, Liam, what's going on? People are talking. Some of them are saying you cut the power and internet on purpose. At first, I laughed. Then I stopped laughing. By 2 p.m., I got an email from a potential investor, a VC in New York we'd been negotiating a $3 million deal with, would appreciate some clarification re recent online discussions. We take reputation seriously, both business and personal. And just like that, my silence had become its own weapon turned against me. Helix held a board meeting the next morning, emergency session. I sat at the head of the table while half a dozen partners stared at me like I had just brought mold into the lab. Some of our collaborators are uneasy, one said carefully. We're not accusing you of anything, Liam. But public perception matters. Another added, we don't want personal issues to affect Helix's image. Would you consider releasing a statement, something to clear the air? I looked down at my hands, my knuckles pale from gripping the table's edge. Then I shook my head. No, someone repeated. I'm not going to air out my private life so the internet can chew on it. I won't drag my family into headlines just to silence a rumor. They didn't like that answer, but they didn't fire me. Later that week, Spencer reached out again. He offered to go public, to make a statement clarifying everything, that I hadn't caused the outage, that I'd been mistreated for years, that the birthday wasn't what it seemed. I thanked him, then I declined. You've already been dragged into enough, I said. I appreciate it, but this has to come from me or not at all. For a moment, I thought I'd made the wrong choice. Everywhere I turned, emails, meetings, even coffee runs, someone gave me that look. The one that said, I heard something. The one that wondered if I was the kind of person who'd sabotage their own mother's birthday out of spite. I barely slept. I pushed through 14-hour workdays, buried myself in code and clinical reports, hoping productivity might redeem me. But the shadows followed. I started asking myself if maybe I'd made a mistake by showing up that day, by letting Spencer say what he did, by not just staying away, staying quiet. I wasn't used to being seen. And being seen, truly seen, comes at a price. Marjorie texted twice that week, once to check in, once to say she missed me. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't care, but because even kindness felt like another weight. I was tired of feeling indebted to anything soft. I locked down my personal accounts, stopped answering family calls. I didn't drive back to Boulder. I didn't return the casserole dish someone had mailed me weeks ago. I pulled into myself like a hibernating animal and let the world go on without me. Then one night, Ashton broke the silence. The message came just past midnight. Liam, you've destroyed this family. Mom was admitted to the hospital after the party. Stress-induced complications. Hope you're proud of yourself. It hit like a punch to the ribs. Even though I knew better, even though I understood it was manipulation cloaked in guilt, I still felt it. It still found the crack in me. I didn't respond. Instead, I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I sat there, long after the apartment had gone still, with the low hum of the fridge and the cold air pressing in. And I asked myself, had I gone too far? Had I become so determined not to be used that I forgot how to care? I didn't sleep that night. I just sat with a cold cup of coffee in my hands, thinking about the birthday cake I made for Mom when I was 17. Everyone forgot. I used grocery store icing to write her name in shaky letters and lit the candles by myself. She never said thank you. But she did take a photo and post it, writing "My sweet family" under it. Even though no one else had touched the cake. Now, years later, I wondered if that moment had been the start, not of rebellion, but of awakening. By Friday, things had worsened. One of Helix's board members called me in. He didn't waste time. There's been concern, he said, about optics. There's discussion about whether it's appropriate for you to continue leading the Helix Link project. I didn't flinch, because of a personal smear campaign? Because the campaign is gaining traction. I looked him in the eye. If what you need is someone who performs well under cameras and pretends everything's fine, I'm not your guy. He nodded slowly. We'll let you know. That was the moment I knew I'd reached the end of something. No family, no steady ground at work, no anchor in any direction. And yet, I wasn't afraid. That surprised me because, even though I was more isolated than I'd ever been, truly, profoundly alone, I still had myself. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The email came Monday morning, subject line, special shareholder session, attendance mandatory. It was from Helix's board, with a formal agenda, review of executive conduct and leadership viability. I read it without blinking. I knew what it was, not a trial, just a reckoning. I spent the rest of the day gathering performance reports, development timelines, and cost efficiency breakdowns. I didn't prepare an argument. I didn't plan to plead. I was bringing the truth. Whether they took it or not wasn't mine to control. That night, my phone rang. Marjorie. I know you don't want help, she said. But I couldn't watch this happen and stay quiet. I gathered your bank records from the last 2 years. You gave them over $16,000. I printed them and sent them to Carter. Carter, I said, stunned, your cousin, the one who chairs the family council in Boulder. I also forwarded him a voicemail from last year, Richard, saying, if you come back here with that attitude, don't call me your son. I didn't say anything. I didn't have the words. Marjorie continued, you never asked for support. That's exactly why you deserve it. The next day, Carter called a family meeting. I wasn't invited, but I heard about it. He laid everything out. Proof of my financial contributions, copies of the voicemail, even statements from neighbors who remembered seeing me fix Richard's broken water heater in the snow. The effect was immediate. Family members who'd once parroted Ashton's version of events started questioning it. Those who stayed silent began pulling back from Richard and Ashton. I didn't know how to feel, vindicated, grateful? Mostly, I felt stunned, like watching a machine turn itself off after years of humming. That same afternoon, something else happened. Spencer posted on LinkedIn, a long-form piece, simple and precise. Never underestimate someone who says little. The people who shout loudest about loyalty and morality are often the ones living off the quiet labor of others. He didn't mention names, but the message was clear, and it went viral. By evening, HR reps from 3 other biotech firms had shared it. Ashton's reputation took a hard hit. Her speaking engagement at a startup summit was cancelled. Private comments leaked. Emails surfaced. The image she'd curated began to crack. And then came the final moment at the Helix shareholder meeting. I arrived with my reports in hand. I didn't expect anyone to speak on my behalf, but Spencer was already seated in the gallery. When the floor opened, he stood. I was invited here today, he said, not as a former partner of anyone involved, but as a professional who's worked with Liam Parker for over 2 years. He glanced around the room. I've watched him navigate pressure most of us can't imagine. I've seen him lead with clarity, restraint, and results. Whatever noise is outside this company, it hasn't touched what he's built inside it. He paused. If you lose him, you'll lose more than a name on paper. You'll lose the one person who still believes in the integrity of this place. The room was quiet. The board voted, unanimous. I stayed on, not just as lead on the Helix Link project, but with upgraded authority. Public relations released a statement backing my character, affirming my leadership, and distancing the company from the personal drama. When I stepped out of that building, it wasn't victory I felt, it was release. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for years without realizing it, and now it was gone. That evening, I walked along the Colorado River, where I'd gone the first week I left home. Same sky, same quiet. But I wasn't the same person. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was simply clear. And that was more than enough. After the shareholder meeting, I took 3 days off, no phone calls, no emails, no meetings. I left my Helix badge in the drawer and let my world go quiet. I returned to the routines that once grounded me, brewing coffee before the sun rose, walking to the corner bodega for a paper I barely read, letting the silence of the park fill the spaces where anxiety used to live. But in that stillness, my mind played the reel over and over again: the birthday party, the champagne flutes, Richard's cold handshake, Evelyn's silence, Ashton's smirk. I thought silence would offer peace, but it only revealed the echoes I'd been trying to outrun. Then Evelyn called, her voice cracked before she even said my name. She didn't try to defend herself. She didn't blame the media or the rumors. She just said, "I didn't know what I was missing until everything was exposed. I didn't protect you. I didn't even notice you were in the fire." She paused. "We just wanted the family to look good in front of Spencer. And you've always done things so quietly. We forgot you were bleeding under it all." I didn't speak. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because there was too much, and too late. That evening, I received an email from Richard. One line: "I was wrong. I should have known you didn't have to prove yourself to be respected. I'm sorry." No requests, no explanations, just that. I read it 3 times, then a 4th. I expected anger or relief, maybe both, but what I felt was nothing, just a dull weight lifting, a closing of a chapter one never agreed to write. The next day, Spencer stopped by the Helix office. He was in town for a summit and asked if I had time for lunch. We met at a quiet cafe a few blocks from downtown. He didn't mention Ashton, didn't ask about my family. He only said, "I used to live for what others thought of me. But after watching you stand through all of this without grandstanding, I've realized that peace isn't loud. Sometimes it's just staying still when the storm begs you to scream." We didn't talk much after that. But something settled between us, not friendship, not closure, just mutual recognition. 2 people who'd been shattered differently and learned how to stay standing. That weekend, I did something I hadn't dared to do for years. I walked into a community center in Austin and joined a support group for adults estranged from their families. I didn't know what to expect. The room was plain: folding chairs, weak coffee, one too many fluorescent lights. When it was my turn to speak, I told them about the birthday cake, the voicemail from my father, the boardroom that almost turned its back on me, and the moment Spencer called me boss in front of everyone. Nobody gasped. Nobody pitied me. They just nodded. I wasn't a spectacle there. I was just one of them. For the first time in my life, I felt understood without having to explain. And it hit me: I didn't need their apologies to heal. I needed to know I wasn't wrong for drawing a line. And for once, I didn't feel guilty for standing behind it. It was a quiet Saturday when I decided to host a tea gathering in my apartment. No occasion, no formal invitation, just an open message to a handful of people who had shown up. Not when it was easy, but when it mattered. No decorations, no catered pastries, just mismatched mugs, playlists I made years ago, and conversations that didn't require pretending. The guests: Spencer, a new colleague from Helix who reminded me a little too much of my younger self, 2 people from the support group who'd quickly become anchors, and Marjorie and Carter, who needed no invitation to remind me what love without performance looked like. Carter brought a manila folder. I raised an eyebrow as he placed it on the kitchen counter. He smiled and said, "You don't need this anymore." But I thought it should live somewhere safe. It was the original record of my bank transactions, the proof that had once saved me. He didn't mean it as evidence. He meant it as a memory, that even quiet generosity mattered, that goodness didn't deserve to be erased just because others refused to see it. Marjorie hugged me before she left, not a polite sidearm embrace, but one that lingered. One that said, "You are not a burden," without needing to be spoken aloud. That night, I checked my email before bed. Ashton's name lit up my inbox. The subject line was empty. Her message was not, "Liam, I envied your silence. I thought it meant you had nothing to say, but now I see it meant you didn't need approval to exist. You didn't beg for attention or applause, and that scared me. It made me feel like I was less. I can't undo what I've done. But if someday you ever let me try, I won't waste the chance." I read it. I didn't reply. Forgiveness is not a transaction. It's not earned in a single message. It's a slow, uneven journey, and I'm not rushing it for anyone's comfort, including my own. The Helix Link project launched that month and exceeded every forecast. Weeks later, I was asked to speak at a biotech conference in Austin. The talk was supposed to be about innovation, but I told the truth instead, about boundaries, dignity, and the kind of resilience no grant can fund. Afterward, a student approached me. He looked nervous, but determined. "You probably don't remember," he said, "but you were on a podcast last year. You talked about how nobody in your family believed in your dreams. That's why I kept going." That episode changed how I saw myself. I didn't know what to say. I just shook his hand. Then I walked out into the warm Austin sun and passed by my favorite cafe. On the sidewall, someone had scrawled in chalk, "Home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's a decision." This time, I understood it. I went home that night and opened a new document on my laptop, titled Parker Boundaries, a small scholarship fund for students who'd been overlooked, underestimated, or told they were too much or not enough. There wouldn't be banners or plaques. Just a quiet email that said, "We see you. You matter. Keep going." I don't need a house full of memories to know what family feels like. Because family isn't who shares your name. It's who lets you be entirely yourself without fear, without cost.